just permitted, but actually encouraged to publicly criticize our leaders, that he's like a lightning rod, and much the same way as Israel's being personified as Bibi Netanyahu, not as Israel, by Israel's detractors. And so it's a tremendous tactic. It's obviously going way beyond political rhetoric when you're trying to assassinate the President of the United States. That's for certain. I would agree that, as I said earlier, a lot of this is tactical. He's wielding both the carrot and the stick. The question is whether these folks in power in Tehran, wherever they're hiding out these days, give a damn about that. And there's no political war of attrition there. There's a political war of attrition in the West. So I guess we'll see which way it goes. Thank you, Abby. We'll go to Brian, followed by Anson.
Hey, Gary. Iran and the United States was never on the same page. Trump would put out a statement, they would put out an opposite statement, or no, that's not the way it was. I know somebody had yesterday a signed MOU, but from everybody, so you would think that they would stick to the agreement. We did the honorable thing and took the blockade away. We took off the sanctions. We upheld our end of that agreement that we were willing to go to. They never opened that straight. There were some few ships that went through, but they never really allowed that strait to be open. So we kind of stepped in this in the very beginning, and Trump gave it a try, but time for the MOU and the peace talk is over. So we really don't have any choice but to go to war, either until we see a regime change, or at least until that regime agrees that they're going to stick to an actual memo of understanding and stick to the rules. I think they were playing games and stalling as long as they could for whatever reason. Maybe they were rebuilding or getting their stuff into place or whatever, but I think they were stalling and playing games and never intended to do peace, and it shows. Why would they, why did they bomb that cargo ship? Why would they say that the ships couldn't go through Oman if they were wanting peace? I think, the United States did their part. I mean, Trump immediately took the blockade away. I mean, and I personally think he should have waited on that, but, it's his call. But at least he did do our end of the bargain. They never held up their end of the bargain. As far as I can see, they never really agreed fully to that memo of understanding, and we're not really going to have a choice. And maybe, hopefully Trump can get, at least a majority of the people behind him, and knowing that, look, we tried and it didn't work, so we're going to have to try something different. And that's where I am with it. Thanks.
So, Brian, as I mentioned yesterday, history shows this should be no surprise to anyone. Iran and its proxies, and we use the term proxies, but let's just be clear that these terrorist groups that have been attacking Israel, including on October the 7th, are doing so at the direction of Iran. The command and control is from Iran. The financing of it is from Iran. And you can see every time some kind of a peace or a settlement or a negotiation, or however you want to call it, is struck between Israel and these terrorist groups, the terrorist groups do not adhere to what they agreed to adhere to. And so it should come as no surprise to anyone that Iran didn't live up to the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding. They couldn't even hold themselves back for the short period of time was prescribed in the MOU in order to negotiate a real end of the hostilities. They couldn't even wait that short period of time. They just don't have it in them. They are not the same as the West. Their perspective is completely different. You know the story about the scorpion and the turtle or the tortoise, where take me across the river on your back, but we're mortal enemies. You'll sting me, but if I sting you, we'll both drown. So there's no way. And then he stings him. He says, "Why did you do that? Now we'll both drown." He says, "I don't know. It's just in my nature." That's what we're dealing with here, Brian.
Well, one other quick thing I was going to say, too, I read a story this morning that there was also some strikes on Iran that were not claimed by the United States, and I was wondering if you knew what other Gulf states...
I do not know who was responsible for that, and as I was told yesterday, if a source told me who was responsible for that, I'm just saying what somebody told me. I don't know what I'm talking about. So maybe I should just keep my mouth shut when I get information. I'm being facetious.
I'm just wondering, though, why don't they, if they're willing to shoot it while we're shooting and kind of be, like, oh, we didn't do that. Why do you think any of those Gulf states over there are willing to side with us if this goes to war?
They have their own domestic issues. They have people, each one of them, who want to overthrow their regimes. They have to be extremely cautious about how they do this. When some of these Gulf states showed support. No, they didn't fly jets or fire missiles, but they showed strategic military support for the United States and Israel last year. This was not something that was made public because of their internal problems. They have to negotiate these waters as carefully as the ships negotiate the Strait of Hormuz to avoid the minefields. It's not dissimilar at all. So I don't particularly see a pan-Arab rising against Iran. Would I like to see that? Absolutely. I think I don't know how any nation sits back and takes incoming from a neighboring nation without responding. I know Israel gets criticized for doing so, but can you imagine if the United States took incoming from another nation, that we would just sit back and say, all we are saying is give peace a chance? That's not the time to sing that song, which I actually love. This is a time when you use your military might and you call on your friends to help you. You can't allow for this kind of bullshit. So I'm with you, Brian. I wish that, but I don't see it in the foreseeable future. And by the way, as you all know, I accept the fact that I could be wrong. And in this case, I hope I am. Anson, followed by, my eyes are bothering me here, and the name is Estefan. Anson.
The biggest constraint against Iran would what they would look and see a united America intent on continuing military action and strong, brutal economic action until the nature of the regime radically changes, which would mean a regime change. That would be, I mean, why is Iran doing what it's doing? But they see the midterm elections coming up, and every time they turn on their TVs in Iran, if they could, and watch the American news, they would see that if the Democratic Party reflects the expressed will by polls of the American people, 55, maybe 60%, that all military military operations whatsoever, any and all, against Iran would stop immediately. And they see the Gulf denuded of the American Navy as soon as the Democratic Party gains political power in the United States. They know Trump is detested by probably over half of the American people. And they see that he is going to become a lame duck president for the next 2 years, 2.5 years. He can blather all he wants, and they can just ignore him and wait for the right political upheaval in the United States, such that if you flew a satellite over the straits over the Iran and the Persian Gulf, you would not see any aircraft carriers. You would not see any American warships. You would see the bases denuded all around the Middle East. An isolationist America withdrawing to its own borders, and all for the sake of ensuring that we keep gas prices cheap. They don't think the West, in particular the United States, has the intestinal fortitude to stand firm until the Iranian government chooses to join the peaceful nations of the West. And that would be the biggest constraint that if God forbid, pick whoever you choose to be a true leader of the Democratic Party in the United States would stand tall and say, we will develop the specific requirements to achieve a ceasefire and a negotiated peace with Iran. And it would be well debated and supported by 80% of the people when it was finally debated and put in place. And then the willingness of the American people to do whatever it takes in order to achieve those goals. We didn't do that. We haven't done that. That's the starting this war without that in place was one of the dumbest acts that America has done, at least since 9/11. And until they see a united states, a united America willing to put on the military pressure, and I don't mean boots on the ground, but reestablishing an ironclad naval blockade. No Iranian ship moves in or out of the Gulf, period. Any Iranian ship inside the Persian Gulf will be sunk. How about that? Anything Iranian that has a dollar sign attached to it will be immediately confiscated by the united financial control of the West. That's what it's going to take in order to make Iran join the nations of peace. The West does not have the gumption to be able to hold them accountable and keep up the appropriate economic and military pressure until they do so. Thank you.
And Anson, I'd like to add to that, and I'd like you to try this out for size, and that is, why is there this big political drumbeat against the United States engagement in areas where you and I may feel that the United States, that it is, that there are existential threats to the United States from these regions, but we're being told over and over and over again.
Go to JohnKitoverNews.com.
Nothing to do with us, and
we are listening to a live broadcast podcast about Donald Trump and the Iran war. Like this video, subscribe, and share.
Funding the political conflict in the United States, that they use a highly sophisticated method. They don't bribe officials like in the old Soviet Union days and the old Red China days, but we know that there's this state-sponsored information warfare. There's digital manipulation. There are organizations that are funded. If you follow the money, there are organizations that are funded that are out there screaming and hollering about the policy of the United States, and as American citizens, they surely have the right to do so, but they are, let's not lose sight of the fact that they are funded by Russia and China, and when we know that they are funded by Russia and China, that we can assess perhaps their motivation, or maybe not the motivations of the individuals, but we can assess Russia and China's motivation for infiltrating or funding or establishing such organizations here in the United States. So what we see may not be organic in nature in terms of the populist view towards these situations.
I think that the Great Divide, which you're talking about, I believe the Great Divide is 99% a great divide of the American people, American citizens, red-blooded Americans, if you will. Some of it, sure, on the fringes is going to be developed by people that want the seat, that want to weaken the United States and make it lose its superpower status, et cetera, which that's the motivation of Russia and China, and that's the motivation of Iran, death to America. They say it out loud all the time. But I believe the divide is true and real within the United States, and it's so destructive that we are unable to do the things that America used to do, to stand up firmly and resist using
these regions, but we're being told over and over and over again.
JohnKitoverNews.com.
Nothing to do with us, and
We are listening to a live broadcast podcast about Donald Trump and the Iran war. Like this video, subscribe, and share.
Political conflicts in the United States, that they use a highly sophisticated method. They don't bribe officials like in the old Soviet Union days and the old Red China days. But we know that there's a state-sponsored information warfare. There's digital manipulation.
Until we can do that,
there are organizations that are funded. If you follow the money, there are organizations that are funded, that are out there screaming and hollering about the policy of the United States, and as American citizens, they surely have the right to do so, but they are, let's not lose sight of the fact that they are funded by Russia and China, and when we know that they are funded by Russia and China, that we can assess perhaps their motivation, or maybe not the motivations of the individuals, but we can assess Russia and China's motivation for infiltrating or funding or establishing such organizations here in the United States. So what we see may not be organic in nature in terms of...
And I don't think he believes that some right-wing nuts somewhere around the world are influencing me. We're going to have our great divide. Now, I'm not trying to pick on Scott, but Scott and I we don't even have a great divide. There's just a difference of opinion that Scott and I have, where most of the time Marshall and I would tend to agree with each other. But that's the natural ebb and flow of politics in the United States without any foreign or other untoward influence.
Thank you, Anson. We'll go now.
You're listening to a live broadcast of the news regarding the Iran war with Donald Trump. Go to ChicagoNewsIncorporated.com.
I'm talking to you from Tehran. I'm so happy there are people like you, and especially Alan, who understand we people who took hostage by this Islamic fundamentalist government who killed us months ago. And during this war, they had some people in the street with gun. They threatened us to from a revolution. They are afraid from a revolution to take place. They spend our resources for the terrorist groups. We so pleased Mr. Trump, who killed Khamenei, and he did his best, and we become so happy if there would be a boots on the ground and regime change. But I know Mr. Trump is responsible for his country's benefits, and it cost so much for him and his country. But these efforts they do for their own benefits maybe has some benefits for the people of Iran, and I don't know what would happen after this, but remaining of these terrorist groups in Iran would cause lack of sources, lack of water, lack of everything in my country. They waste everything for terrorist groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. And it's rare that we get to hear from somebody in Iran. And I know you're literally putting your life at risk by doing this, so we appreciate your contribution, and if you feel comfortable and safe, please join us again in the future. William, followed by Daryl.
So, Iran is not like us. You started by making asking a good question. You know, how do they see the world? How are they seeing the world? And you again reiterated talking to somebody else. They are not the same as the West. And that's really important to understand. They have allies. And the allies that they have are not the same as one another either. Russia and Iran, China and North Korea, they are allies of sorts, but they're not the same as what we think of as Western allies, because they're not like us. They have peculiarities. What do they have in common? They're all basically authoritarian regimes. But culturally, they've got a lot that's different from each other, and you know, only Iran is really a theocratic regime, at least formally, and acknowledging themselves as being a theocratic regime. You know, you can argue that all of them are, but they're not really the same. So we started this war. We went into the war without consulting with our own allies, and our structure of alliances was the greatest strength that the United States had for 75, 80 years until recently. And so in the first part of the Trump administration, there was a general destruction of the alliance structure. There was a lashing out based on this Don Road doctrine. We're going to withdraw. We're going to become isolationists. We're going to withdraw the boundaries of the United States, and we're going to tariff everybody so that they should all follow us. So that not only did we alienate the allies on some ideological grounds, but we actually economically attacked them. We threatened to attack Greenland. We threatened to we basically discounted the sovereignty Canada, our neighbor, of Mexico. We basically treated people that would be natural allies like enemies. So we go into this war without an alliance, without going to Congress, without a strategic plan, without an endpoint, without an exit strategy, and without, fundamentally, as Anson said, that Trump should have gone to Congress. The Republicans are in power. They have the House, the Senate, 2/3 of the Supreme Court, and state governments pretty evenly split across the country.
We don't have the Senate. The thing that nobody in your shoes ever says is that it takes 7 Democratic votes to pass any legislation. You have to have 7 side, a little bluster, and on phone is not destroying the billboard anytime.
Okay, I can't hear you because you're breaking up, but what I'm saying is that regardless of those fine points of democratic governance, we went in without doing the basics of having a strategy, a plan, an exit strategy, an endpoint, and even consulting, getting some sort of authorization for use of military force, which would have entailed going in front of the American people and garnering support of the representatives and the American people. We failed to do that. So we went to war. We went to war with basically a Secretary of Defense who titled himself as Secretary of War, who's basically picked because he looked good on Fox TV and was a good theatrical player.
Okay, but what does this have to do specifically with the
Because
question
we went in and lost. And when we went in and lost, we don't acknowledge it. And now we're scrambling around for what do we do now? And they are not the same as the West.
Let's suss this out just a little bit. You say Trump went in and lost. Did he not secure a memorandum of understanding leading to a ceasefire?
That was not a victory. That was, and we can argue this later, but I believe that was basically articles of surrender.
Well,
articles of surrender.
I'm not talking
That
about
was a memorandum of understanding, which is
historical
different.
definition of it.
No,
I'm talking
there
about
is a
practical purposes. We
distinct
lost.
difference. No,
We lost.
there is a
The Palace of Versailles, of all places, to sign it.
okay, so there's
Oh
a
my gosh,
difference.
there is a distinct difference. There's a distinct difference between signing something that is a losing thing and signing a memorandum of understanding. Simply because you don't like Trump doesn't mean you have to portray every little thing as a loss, William.
Well, I agree with Gary that we need to see the world through their eyes. And I don't think we saw the world through their eyes.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question that I was trying to ask you there, William, and that is, so you see it as a surrender, but did not the memorandum of understanding, the agreement was that they would open up the Strait of Hormuz?
I think the memorandum, I think it was, they never opened up the Strait of Hormuz.
I didn't ask that. The question I have specifically is, wasn't there an agreement on the part of Iran to open the Hormuz? Maybe about it. There are 14 points and they're pretty unambiguous. If you read the memorandum of understanding, they agreed to open up the Strait of Hormuz. They agreed to not impede the flow of, the transit of commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not arguing whether they affected the agreement. I'm saying the agreement was reached. So if you take it on its face value, setting aside your agreement that we need to do a better job of understanding their mindset, and I think we're both in agreement it was almost predictable that things would work the way they are working right now. Wouldn't that have been something that the president achieved? He was able to, because that's his main goal right now because of the domestic pressures, I believe, with regard to the price of gasoline at the pump. So wouldn't that be considered a victory if in fact the Iranians had upheld their end of the deal?
Well, I agree with you that they're not like us, and they were never going to uphold their end of the deal, and that they don't think like us.
Right, but I said setting that aside, isn't
and
that a victory?
I don't think it was a victory because I don't think that. I think
So
that
what-
we
so
achieved a false. I think we achieved a false victory.
You're an attorney. I presume you've negotiated contracts, real estate contracts, employment contracts, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so then when you negotiate a contract on behalf of your client, you give something up and you gain something in return, and sometimes it's not an actual quid pro quo. Sometimes one party benefits better than the other party, but is that a surrender?
So I've had negotiated contracts, and people will enter into contracts, and I've also been in cases where people breach contracts, as is the basically the thesis that you have now, and I agree they breached the contract, but I believe the underlying problem is that we never really had an agreement, and that the victory claimed was a false victory because although the points were agreed to, but yes, and they're dirty contract breakers, and they didn't keep their word, and they didn't live up to the agreement.
There wasn't an agreement, William.
Yes, but people breach. Trump breaches agreements all the time.
But that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about Trump before because you said. I just want to say that they're the only. When you see the world through their eyes, they're not the only ones who come to the table who are dishonest or disingenuous.
And that hasn't happened in any of the contracts.
Did we ever actually have a meeting of the minds, a contract that would be enforceable?
Wait a minute. Never had a meeting of them.
They didn't have a meeting of the minds. The whole memorandum of understanding was BS. I don't believe it was a genuine agreement that they agreed to. I think they breached it.
So by your reasoning, any divorce decree is BS because
No.
a divorce decree only is as good as the willingness of the parties to abide by it.
Well, no. A divorce decree is between the people who are married, so that's a little bit different. But
there are conditions.
It's sort of like having a contract.
There are conditions of divorce decrees, and you and I both know, and you don't have to be an attorney to know this. Because
Taking out a divorce and just stick to the real estate. Do people break real estate contracts? Sure, people break real estate contracts. Okay,
so there was no agreement. There was no agreement there.
I think the memorandum of understanding
to use your analogy, if I renege on my agreement to pay my mortgage payment,
then you gotta go to court.
Right, and in this case, the court was the president dropping bombs on 90 sites 2 nights in a row. That doesn't mean that there was a surrender.
All right, let's forget about surrender. But was there an agreement? Because apparently
There was an agreement. We signed it.
All right. So the dirty contract breakers. Now the agreement's
what's
broken.
an agreement?
What
Is it
are
a
you
meeting
gonna do
of the
about it?
minds? Was there an offer? Was there an acceptance? Go through it. Yes, there was an agreement.
Yeah, okay, you're right, Abby, there's an agreement, but one side was insincere about the agreement.
Well, okay, we know that.
And they didn't.
You're saying there wasn't. Wait, whoa. Let me just.
And now that we all agree that they broke the
there was an
agreement. We all agree that they've
Are you
broken the
saying
agreement.
there was an
Now that we all agree that
anticipatory
they've broken the
repudiation,
agreement.
William?
We all agree that they've broken the agreement.
William, hold on. Abby asked you a question.
William,
Hold
are
on,
you
Abby,
saying
ask
there
you a
was
question.
an anticipatory repudiation in this agreement?
No, I'm saying that the agreement at its inception was just a dodge to cut.
William, was that you? 'Cause I didn't mute you.
I didn't.
Trump was not sincere about achieving victory in the first place, and the way he
That's
said
not
about this.
the point.
And let me finish the
No,
sentence.
no,
He was
no,
saying-
no,
he
no.
was-
That
he
is
had an
not the
agreement.
point.
He had an
That is
agreement
not the
to
point,
cut and
William.
run.
Was there an anticipatory renege on the agreement or not? Because you're blaming Trump for something that the Iranians did themselves. And I don't understand why. It's not that difficult to figure out. I don't have to be a lawyer to figure out they broke the damn agreement.
Because they don't think enough about us and the agreement
So
to
that we
actually
shouldn't have gone into an
believe.
agreement.
It was
Then we
don't
can
work
never
with
go
agreement with
into
them.
it, William, but we did, so it's
You can
there.
work reasonably, you can work backwards. Did they have an agreement? It was an agreement that they were willing
Oh my
to
God.
break.
Dude, your hatred of Trump is clouding you from being honest. You are not being honest. You're being dishonest.
Yes, they have
Okay,
an
we're gonna-
agreement.
we're gonna
They have an
move
agreement
on.
that both sides were not going to follow.
Okay, we're gonna move on because you're obfuscating the issue that we're discussing. But I just want to point out. Let me give you a real life example of a person who took a position at a relatively small company,
legal documents.
and he
Damn
was
testimony.
it was pledged to him in writing by the president of the company who hired him, the president of the company, that upon severance he would receive certain stock options to the company. And the severance ultimately came. But by that time, this guy wasn't president. A new guy was president. So he says, I want to claim my stock options. This guy said, I don't know anything about this. Well, the contract predates your arrival here. You're going to have to talk to the CEO. It's a small company, so he was able to walk into the CEO's office. He walks into the CEO's office, and he says to the CEO, I have it right here in writing that I would get stock options upon severance. The CEO says, well, that was, I'll call him by his first name only, that was negotiated by Joel, and Joel hasn't been here for a number of years. But it's a binding contract. And he said, sue me. Well, the cost of suing him was more than the amount of money he potentially would gain from the stock options, so he left with his tail between his legs. It happens. It doesn't mean there wasn't an agreement, but there was no desire or anticipation by this company to live up to the agreements. No matter what the law says, no matter what recourse the law says that you have. At least in this case, there is some compensation. It may not be a compensation that we want to stomach or that we support, but you saw it. There was, unlike my friend who never got his compensation, the United States got some compensation because they bombed the hell out of some military assets in Iran. And by the way, there is some reporting today that the Iranians recognize that they fucked up when they attacked those ships. They would never say it publicly, but you can read the reporting, and you can agree that it's reporting is accurate, or you may agree that it's inaccurate, because I guess reporters, I was told yesterday, shouldn't be believed if they don't reveal their sources, and that's fine, by the way. It's up to you on whether you accept the veracity or not, right, Daryl? Daryl followed by David.
Yeah, so, off top, I would like to briefly, if I can, some latitude, I would like to kind of defend William. I've actually signed 7 MOUs in my career, and what I've come to learn is that generally MOUs are not necessarily legally binding, right? The MOU is, you know, me and you, Gary, we're going to come to an understanding, and if you do this and I do that and you do this, we will at some point enter into a longer form agreement that has like more teeth to it.
Yeah,
in a
but
sense.
wait a minute, second, Daryl.
Yeah.
What memo? What agreement between two nations is really legally binding? Huh? How many?
Well, treaties are usually legally binding.
How many countries are our country as well have been accused of violating international law? Okay, who's going to enforce that international law? Who enforces it? It's only based on whether the parties involved are willing to live up to the obligations that they announced at the time that they signed the memo of understanding.
Well, yeah, it's good faith, right? It's the idea of good faith.
That's all it is.
Daryl, MOU can be binding. There's certain elements that can make an MOU legally enforceable. And,
yeah, but that's why I said Abby. I said generally.
And there's certain clauses
generally, not legally binding.
But
yes.
There are certain clauses in MOUs that are absolutely binding. You know, where you have confidentiality clauses and such, they are binding. And if you have a clear intention of the parties, and it essentially covers contractual elements, you can have it legally enforceable. So I just want to tell you, it's not a truthful statement to say that they are not enforceable.
See, but that's not what I said. I said they are generally, I use very specific words. I said they are generally not legally binding. I didn't say they are never legally binding. I didn't say
they can be legally enforceable.
Okay, well, generally.
It varies from state to state as well.
Generally is like the operative word that I'm going with, right? I'm only talking about what William was saying, and
it's a figure that I write down on at a napkin in a restaurant.
I don't know why we're arguing about this. I really don't. I don't understand this. Well, yeah, because what William was saying was technically not wrong, not fundamentally, but technically what William was saying was not necessarily wrong. That was the only point I was trying to make. Part of this whole MOU thing was particularly with Iran, was that it was supposed to be, at least this is how it was presented to the American people, right?
To the world. To the world.
Yes, we have a framework for a memorandum of understanding, right? And there were 14 points, I believe.
No. That's technically inaccurate. It was not a framework for a memorandum of understanding. It was a memorandum of understanding, which was a framework for a ceasefire. There's a difference.
Yes, and part of that was, I believe maybe it was the 13th or the 14th, I don't remember which point it was, but wasn't part of the framework that there would be a cessation of all attacks or whatever, and
yes.
Yeah, so I'm only saying technique. I didn't even come up to talk about any of this. I came up to talk about what Anson was saying. I was just saying, from a technical perspective, what William was saying was not necessarily inaccurate.